Math is hard. That's what she said. Whether you're trying to split a dinner bill equitably 4 ways with your friends, or quickly trying to figure out if something on sale really is on sale. Everyday math is annoying. But resume math, the math that we use to calculate our quantifiable accomplishments, now that's some high stakes stuff. It could mean the difference between getting and not getting an interview. And when your math goes wrong, it can wreck your resume. So let's take a look at how to prevent bad math from ruining your resume. First, let's quickly talk about why we might do math on our resumes and how quantifiable accomplishments can help. Quantifiable accomplishments, when they are accurate and appropriate, can be very powerful on our resumes. Numbers can convey impact and proof of skills much faster than words can. And when conveying impact of our work through numbers, this helps the reader get an idea of how qualified we are for the role to which we're applying in a much faster fashion. Quantifiable accomplishments can help us showcase our work contributions where we increased, improved, grew, scaled, expanded, accelerated, expedited, saved, mitigated, or decreased various things. Quantifiable accomplishments can also be used to highlight the scope or the size of things that we were responsible for. Quantifiable accomplishments can go wrong sometimes on resumes. In fact, in most resumes that I read, there's some sort of bad resume math happening. But it isn't your fault as a job seeker. You hear constantly that numbers are important to show on your resume. And so what do? You put numbers in your resume. But often these numbers can fail in a number of ways. And what I most commonly see is quantifiable accomplishments that diminish your contributions at work, numbers that detract from your contributions at work, or quantifying that distracts the reader from truly understanding the impact or contributions of your work. Let's take a closer look at some of these common miscalculations. The first instance of bad math that I commonly see on resumes is the classic undersell. Here's a real-life conversation that I had with one of my clients. So I see that you managed a portfolio of 4 clients? Yes, that's right. Okay, 4 clients just sounds a little low. What kind of clients were these? Enterprise clients? Okay, now we're talking. How much of total percentage of revenue did these clients represent? About 65%. Okay, even better. And how much annual revenue was that? If we're being conservative, about 125 million? So my client was only sharing that they were responsible for a portfolio of only 4 clients. They were counting the wrong thing and in doing so, causing the classic undersell. We know this because as we peeled back the layers and got to the most impactful information, we realized that my client was responsible for the majority of the business. And the business was comprised of enterprise clients. And they were accountable for $125 million of revenue a year. That's a heck of a lot different than 4 clients. To avoid the undersell, make sure that you are sharing the numbers that are the best. And those numbers that best reflect the scope and size of your responsibilities, or the numbers that best illustrate the extent of your contributions and impact at work. If you're in sales, the better number is probably going to be revenue. If you're in customer service, the better number is probably going to be customer satisfaction. But counting the wrong thing isn't always when we're counting people. If you're in project management, counting number of projects isn't as helpful as demonstrating and explaining impact and results of the projects that you've led. If you're in marketing, number of campaigns that you run isn't really that important, but the resulting qualified leads, now that's a different story. And if you're in communications, number of stories that you wrote or pitched isn't as valuable as discussing how you protected or improved a brand. I think you get the picture. So as you've seen from the previous examples, sometimes counting people can be a real problem, like counting clients. But if you're a leader, counting team members can also pose a problem as well. Let's say you have a really small team, like you lead 2 people. So you think, easy, I'll just include a bullet in my resume that says, lead a team of 2 analysts. Womp womp. That just sounds lame, to be honest, and doesn't really instill any confidence in the reader that you might be able to lead a larger team. Also, simply counting the number of people on your lean team doesn't really help the reader understand the impact of the work that you led your team to accomplish. Further, if you are a leader of leaders, then you haven't accounted for the broader team, your direct reports. So let's say you have a really tiny team, and you are not alone in this, by the way. You can use a positive adjective to describe that team, and I just said it earlier. Lead a lean team. And then you don't necessarily want to count the number of team members, rather you can name some of their job titles. So for example, lead a lean digital marketing team, including a social media manager and graphic designer. No counting needed. Let's say you're a leader of leaders. We can really look at counting the broader team. So you might want to include a bullet that sounds something like, lead marketing leadership with a broader team of 25 marketing staff. If you have a geographically dispersed team, then you can always consider mentioning that they are geographically dispersed. Or if they represent multiple countries, you could consider mentioning that as well. So for example, lead a global marketing team dispersed across 20 countries worldwide. But while we're talking about the teams that we're leading, what I'd really like to hear more of in resumes is not about the size of the teams or where they're located, but more so what you led your teams to do. So things like mentoring a team member or multiple team members to earn promotions, leading your team to accomplish a really great thing and what that thing was, enhancing your team's productivity by doing something and what that something was, boosting employee engagement or team morale by doing something as evidenced through surveys and what that something was. When you've held a role for multiple years, the resume reader wants to know about the accomplishments and how you grew over those multiple years. But so often I see on resumes, job seekers are only including a single year's performance. So something like achieved 112% of quota in 2017. So what about 2016 if you were in the role at that time? And what about 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and so on? By only telling a fraction of the story, this allows the reader's imagination to run away and think maybe your performance wasn't great in the other years and so that's why you didn't include it. Don't let their imaginations run wild. Instead of only sharing 1 year's performance in isolation, consider using an average across your entire tenure or multiple years in your tenure, so long as that average still continues to reflect well on your performance. Let's say your average is no good because the market tanked, but you still were the top ranking professional on your team or in your department. You can contrast your performance against the team average or department average or even company average. So that might sound something like, achieved 98% of quota, outpacing team average by 12% and ranking as top salesperson across the department. While I most frequently see job seekers only sharing a fraction of their performance when it comes to multiple years metrics, sometimes I see the reverse and it's an explosion of numbers sharing every possible metric and digit over multiple years. So something like this. Saved 22.4% of budget in 2022, 65% of budget in 2021, 16.23% of budget in 2020, 472% of budget in 2019, 543% of budget in 2018. When you're just listing a bunch of numbers like that, you're actually forcing the reader to have to do some math. We don't want to put the reader in a position of doing work, especially math. If they don't do the math, what they're most likely to do is fixate on the lowest number in the list of numbers. We don't want them to do that either. The solution is the same as the situation where we're only sharing a fraction of the story. And that's to make averages your ami, your friend. Also, rounding numbers. There's really no need to include a number to multiple decimal points. A rounded whole number will do. In many cases, we can really make numbers work for us by doing a little math or sharing more appropriate numbers. But what if we share numbers that can completely detract from our qualifications and make us look woefully unqualified? The times that I most frequently see this is when job seekers are writing a resume where they haven't clearly identified a target job, or where they are unclear on what would be expected of them in the job to which they're applying. So as an example, not having a clear idea of maybe the size of budget they might be responsible for managing, or not having an idea of the size of team that you might lead, not knowing the size of territory that you might be responsible for. Numbers can really bite us in the butt when what we have available to share is much smaller in comparison to what we would be required to manage or be responsible for in the job to which we're applying. The remedy to this is not to simply cut numbers altogether, but instead we want to share better numbers. So we've already talked about better ways to discuss smaller teams. So maybe what if we were in a situation where we were managing a budget that was particularly small? So something in the tens of thousands, but our responsibility in our target job will be much larger than that. Instead of sharing the budget dollar figure itself, we can share things like how much percentage of that budget we may have saved in costs, or perhaps how much percentage of that budget we were able to redirect or reinvest in other initiatives, and then the business results of redirecting that money. Instead of sharing the small size of our territory, we could instead consider sharing the percentage that our territory made up across the whole company's territories, especially if our territory is a larger portion of the total territory when compared to our peers. The point of all of this is that you aren't limited to only one type of metric when illustrating impact. There are many different ways to demonstrate your qualifications without diminishing your work, detracting from your work, or distracting the reader from the impact that you had. So now we know the impact of sharing quantifiable accomplishments the right way on our resumes, but if you'd like to learn more about how to actually write quantifiable accomplishments, then you'll want to check out this video.